Welcome to the Antelope Valley Union High School District Board of Trustees meeting. This board meeting is being recorded. Anyone wishing to observe the meeting may do so via AVUHSD's YouTube channel. Individuals may take photographs or record meetings provided the individual's conduct does not constitute a disruption, including obstructing the views of others. Those wishing to address items on the agenda and matters that are not on the agenda but within the jurisdiction of the AVUHSD board shall do so in person, complete a speaker form, and give it to the designee before the public comment portion of the meeting. The speaker form must be given to Ms. Orozco before the board president announces the item. Once the item has been called, we will no longer accept new cards. Ms. Orozco will call the individual's name to come up to the podium to provide their comments. Individual speakers are limited to 3 minutes each. A total time for public input on each item shall be limited to 20 minutes. Non-agendized items are limited to a total allotment of 20 minutes. Only one person is permitted to stand at the podium at a time. No speaker may relinquish a time allotment to another speaker. The district encourages members of the public to attend board meetings and to address the board concerning any item on the agenda or within the board's jurisdiction. The board does not prohibit public criticism of its policies, procedures, programs, services, acts, or omissions. Similarly, the board does not prohibit public criticism of district employees. Speakers are cautioned that no person is immune from liability for making intentionally false or defamatory comments simply because those comments are made at a public meeting. Attendees are also reminded of the board's civility policy, Policy 1313. This civility policy requires that members of the district staff will treat parents and other members of the public with respect and expect the same in return. The district is committed to maintaining disruption-free board meetings. The board will not permit any disturbance or willful interruption of its board meetings. Persistent disruption by an individual or group are grounds to terminate the privilege of addressing the board. Persistent disruption by an individual shall be grounds for the board president to terminate the individual's privilege to address the board. The district promotes mutual respect, civility, and orderly conduct among district board members, district employees, parents, and the public. The district seeks public cooperation with this endeavor.
Good evening, everyone. Let's do roll call. Cynthia Hernandez.
Present.
Charles Hughes.
Present.
Rosemary Mann.
Present.
Miguel Sanchez will be with us shortly, and student board member John Lloyd's son Gabriel is not here this evening, and I am here, Carla Corona. Please stand and place your right hand over your heart for the national anthem.
Right.
Pledge, sorry. I was about to sing for y'all.
Oh, okay, back up, sing.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Miguel, we can redo that, right?
Okay. So good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. Emily. Hi, Emily. What's your last name? Cortez? Emily Cortez is here to represent the ICC in lieu of John Lloyd. Yes. Thank you, Emily, for being here. Mr. Sanchez just came. So we are now all here.
Excuse that.
That's okay. He's here. So C, Interschool Communications Council. The Board of Trustees will meet with representatives of the Interschool Communications Council. So everybody, really, this is about an open dialogue and really just to have an opportunity to speak with the ICC directly, the representatives from all of our schools, to just talk. And we have a couple of topics or 4 topics of discussion that is really of interest to me. And it's really about your voice this evening and a dialogue. So I think it's pretty informal, but it's also really important. So hopefully you all feel comfortable. Don't be shy. It's really important that we hear your voice. And then Emily, if you can also, help engage your peers if there's ever a dull moment. So I just want to see who's in the room if I can. What schools do we have represented today? I see Lancaster. That's about as far as I can read though. So I see Lancaster, Knight High School. How many Knight High School do we have? 2. And then the first row is all Lancaster. Okay. And then East Side. How many are East Side? Great. Thank you for being here. Store Lancaster. How many from Store Lancaster? 2. Okay. And then the last row? Is that the whole row? Great. And then am I missing anybody over there?
What about the amazing woman in the back?
So, all the kids are the best.
Who are you? I don't think I know
By
you.
yourself, ma'am,
Yeah.
please.
Albert, I advisor.
Hi, Mrs. Calvert. Welcome. Nice to have you here. So, and then Emily, what school are you at? Lancaster. Okay, so we have a decent representation, and I just want us to also think outside of the schools that are represented and think, you know, district-wide. So, let's talk dress code. So really what I have wanted to bring and what John Lloyd and I and Mrs. Mann and Mr. Neans have talked about is giving voice to the students. You're all emerging leaders, I would have to believe, because you're a part of ICC. So we're here because of all of you. We are here to educate you, and we want to hear your thoughts on things. So there's a lot we could talk about, of course, but let's focus on the 4 for this evening, and it's the dress code policy. I understand that everybody got this dress and grooming. I don't expect you to have read the 4 pages, but I hope you skimmed to kind of get a sense. And of course, board, if there's ever any questions or comments or feedback, please feel free to interject. Thinking about dress code and how it fits into your education, I think that's where I want to pinpoint. And we have a very clear dress and grooming policy. What are your thoughts on this revised dress and grooming policy? What is your school experience like when it comes to dress and grooming at your schools? Is it enforced? Do you feel like it's unfairly enforced? Do you feel like it's fairly enforced? Are there gaps? Do you think it's a horrible idea? Do you want uniforms? I mean, it's open for anything, everybody. So, let's just start with that generalized thought. What are your thoughts of our dress and grooming? Oh, sure.
What everyone received is a proposed change through the policy and the administrative.
Oh, I thought we approved it already.
We have not approved.
Oh, okay.
So it was what we
Working.
call the board to have discussion like this around it. So you'll see, if you read through, you can see where there's lineouts. The lineouts and the non-highlighted areas are the existing policy, and then the highlighted areas are the new existing policy.
All right. Thank you for that clarity.
What they have discussed already.
Oh, yeah, that'd be great. Yes.
Okay, so what some of the students have talked about was that if dress code was going to be enforced to be posted around the school, and if that it needs to be noticed when walking in the gates. So if they were to wear like a crop top that's not, I guess, school appropriate, that while entering the gate, security or a teacher or principal should notice ASAP before going into a classroom or in PE. Teachers should not also enforce dress code because it could seem wrong in a way, like they're picking on them or because they don't like them as a student. And also people who develop faster than others. So this can mean like I would not know how to describe this one, but if any one of the students would like to describe what they mean by this. Can you repeat that for me?
Let's use the mobile mic only just for comfort, I suppose. Pass the mic.
They're all pointing to you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Alexandria. I'm the ASP president at Lancaster High School. So I brought up the developmental one because when I was a freshman, I was wearing a crop top to school that was nothing compared to some of the other shirts that I see even today on my campus, but I was told to put a jacket on. And I think that has a lot to do with the fact that I developed faster than some of my peers. I think that's very inappropriate. So I did see that in the revised version that we had saw and that we read over, that one of your guys' points was to not discriminate based on body maturity. And I definitely think that needs to be one of the more enforced pieces of the policy, because that is something that I personally experienced at my campus.
Okay, great, thank you. Emily, was there anything else on that?
No, those are the, before that was talked about. That's cool.
So, okay, so those were three really great points that you bring up. Communication. So right now, I believe we have 5 schools represented. When is the communication happening if someone is out of dress code?
What I've seen personally is it's during a class. So I've had girls in my classroom, the teacher will make a phone call and security would come in and drag them out, and it's just a crazy situation to happen. It takes everybody's attention on that person
Yeah.
and it singles them out. So I definitely think that what Emily brought up, it needs to happen when you're walking into school. I don't think that teachers should be involved because it could like start prejudice against the students, or they might think that's what's happening. If it's enforced right when we're walking into school, I shouldn't even make it into the campus.
So, Mr. Nahan, for clarification, is a part of the teacher's job to enforce dress code?
Force all just,
Okay,
unless it's explicitly stated.
okay, so we have to work through this because it's actually the job of the teacher to enforce policies, but perhaps there needs to be a training on sensitivity and exclusion, because I mean, it's not okay when you're singling out Alexandria, what are you doing? And then everybody goes, whoosh, right?
Yes.
And it's also distracting to the learning environment, et cetera. So maybe that could be something to talk about with training of how, because the policy is here. I mean, we're gonna hopefully revise it to better fit since 31 years ago, which I don't know if you noticed that. That was the last time it was revised.
It'll be like 2.
No, it was not 2. I was in high school. Um, but it has to happen, right? Because I do feel that dress code really is important because it can be distracting, whatever that may mean to one.
Yep.
So how, right? How do we work with our teachers and those that are supposed to enforce the dress code sensitively and accurately, appropriately, et cetera?
I think, yes, helping, like teaching them, finding better ways to actually address it, that can help, but I don't think it'll help the problem of, like, let's say we go through periods 1 through 5 and not a single teacher decides to do that particular piece of their job. And then my 6th period teacher decides he's gonna dress code me at the end of the day. I'm gonna look at him some way because I've gone through 5 classes, my teachers don't care, no one says anything, and now
Yeah.
you specifically seem to have a problem with that.
Right.
That is a
Well,
issue I see.
and that would be consistency, right? And I think that's one of the things that the 3 of us have brought on for the 2 years and now 2 new board members, consistency across the board. And we're holding our superintendent accountable to find that consistency some way, somehow. So that if I was at Eastside High School and let's say I had a crop top on, right? Let's just- And at Eastside High School, I walked in the door, I would get notified just the same as I would at Soar Palmdale.
Yeah.
Consistency across the board. And so that's what we will work towards.
We always had a state firm, fair, and consistent. So that's clearly our direction. We want it to be firm and fair and consistent, because if you have some people enforcing it and some people not enforcing it, then that creates the problem. So I can see how getting through 5 periods, you're like, okay, I'm good. And then 6th period, okay, that teacher's picking on me. It could be that the 5 didn't do their job, or the 5 thought it was okay, and then the 6 may just be picking on you. Who knows? But the thing is, we all should be fair, firm, and consistent, and that's it'll be our direction to our superintendent, who would give that to his staff. But you know how people are, you know, things happen, so you got to
So-
work through it.
So I have a question. During school, when you go to school in the morning, is it first period and a home period, like a homeroom period? Do they start in first period? So there is no more homeroom.
Do we have one at night or we're done? Yeah, no more homework.
I have a question. How many of you feel very confident that you know what the dress code policy is? So maybe we could start by building confidence with every student understanding the dress code policy.
So I took PE. Is anyone else? Oh. So I took PE, and that's the only place where I've seen our dress code visibly posted. She is an RTC. She's never been in locker rooms. So if we're going to enforce a dress code policy, it needs to be for everyone to see and be visible.
And be aware and be in a language that maybe you can understand. Was this handed to you at all?
We have it in our Google.
You have it?
Docs. We can read over it.
Could you explain it to me if you had to?
Like what the whole thing said. I could give you a summary maybe.
I only ask because sometimes if clarification is the issue, maybe if there was a way we could work with you to communicate it to the other students, or the suggestions that you could give us on how we can make it more clear, more visible, get it to all students across the board. Like today, I don't see Antelope Valley High School students represented. So we'd have to figure out a way. Could you give us a suggestion on how we can get this to the majority of students in a clear, concise way, in a language that could be understood by students?
Yes, ma'am. So I think majority of students would see that and walked right past it. No one wants to sit there and read this long, almost constitution looking paper. So
Yeah, it's
even
intimidating.
though
Yeah.
this may seem simple,
Yeah,
I would
me
say
too.
just eye catching in the way that we kind of relay messages like acronyms at our school. Something in that way where the dress code is clear, it's concise, it's implying what it needs to imply, but is still kind of talking to our students in the way that they would be most susceptible to hearing it, because it's definitely not like that. You know, I don't know too many kids who want to stop and read this long list to find out something they don't even really care about, you know?
Right. Is there a student handbook? When you enroll in a high school, do you get a student handbook that says, these are the expectations as a student? I think he wants to.
Do you want
So the closest thing to a handbook that we've gotten is these little binders at the start of the year that they give us that usually has information, a calendar, and like that's where a teacher would usually like write a pass for you. That's what it's intended to, but they've never been used.
So you're also saying that we're spending money that is
Yeah,
not
unnecessary.
useful. Is that a binder or like a
Oh,
journal
it's like
or
a
a calendar?
planner thingy.
It's a calendar.
This year.
And you get one every single year?
Yeah, I've received one
Once you're done. No,
for the
Madam President.
past 2 years and I've never used them. They have the information, they have everything, but they could honestly be used for better things. That money is going to a waste when you could be using it for important stuff that you could actually help kids with. And I feel like it could be implemented into a system where that's how you show kids what like the dress code policy is.
Can you give us an example of a good system?
I feel, I mean, the little planner is a good system, but I feel like when it's not really used, like, okay, the only way that I used it was my third period teacher, Mr. Garcia. He made us write, he would write our passes to use the bathroom in. That's the only time I used it. When you have all 6 of your classes using it, that would be a good system because first of all, you have a calendar you could use. You have the information about the school. When you add and implement like the policies, I feel like that's when kids really start to like, okay, I might, but also not everybody does.
Right. Mrs. Mann, you have a question?
Yes. So do any of the schools have an orientation so you have a freshman orientation, obviously, when you start high school. But is there, or would it be a good idea, I'm just throwing out there, to have a orientation for every level, not just freshmen, as a refresher? Because you know, the year goes on, the year goes throughout the year. We all have a, you know, everybody's got it dialed in, and then everybody goes on vacation and forgets everything. And they come back, and then it's like all of a sudden, oh, I forgot that, or I didn't know that. And there be a grace period from the beginning of the school year to at least a 2-week grace period where there would be like, okay, we've talked about it. No, you know, mid shirts. I don't know what to call them today, but is that something that you would consider? Or Madam President, Mr. Needham?
So those types of things happen through announcements, and most of our sites, if not all, have video announcements now, where they'll do a PowerPoint presentation, and they do it consistently in one period. Most of the schools, it's third period, but that's the way information is conveyed. We do our freshman orientations, but then for all of the other students returning, it goes through announcements, and those announcements are twice a week or more at each site.
So
Video announcements at the very beginning of the year. In some trending TikTok way, we include school. That's what happens.
okay, but is it effective though?
Have you had teachers say we're not playing it? Okay, so then, Mr. Nehan, we need to look at that because ultimately the principals are responsible for having their teachers play it, I would imagine. And you say it's 1 to 2 minutes.
Each time our master schedules or our actual like schedule, there's extra minutes in that period so we can play things. So it's like kind of annoying, and it's also they're not just flat out, oh, I'm not playing it. It's just kind of like Mr. Mercer sends out an email.
Is that consistent with all, at least the representation of the school sites here? Yeah, you're finding that as well.
Yeah, it's the same situation honestly because ours is East Side Extra, and
That's okay.
but yeah, definitely inconsistent. Sometimes it does kind of like I understand why some teachers do it, but it's also like this should know. But we should, I think like the person in our school can have, we should them go on like policies of like the school.
Yeah.
Rather than activities like also put it.
Sure. Well, and one thing just to let you all know, we approved a strategic plan in last year, and a part of it is communications, being able to communicate. And that's not only external communications, but internal communications. And so it is a part of our plan, and we have to make sure that all 21,000 students have access to information, and that is communication, whatever way that is, whether it's these short 2 or 3 minute videos, or it's a poster, or it's a planner, which I mean, it's the technology age. How many kids are even using paper and pen anymore? It's very limited because I teach both college and in the high school, and they don't. So this is a good beginning conversation with that. I do, before we switch to the next topic, I want to ask, what are your thoughts of loosely worded uniforms?
Oh, whoa.
Oh, okay.
It was going back to before. I just wanted to say, I remember it was the planner, and in the planner it had like all the school rules, and this might have been my sophomore or freshman year, but we would go over like our teacher. Everyone had an avid teacher, right? So our teacher would go over the rules and like the rules of the school basically. And now I kind of forgot it now because it was a long time ago. But I was thinking, going back to, I forgot who said it, but they said,
Orientation?
yeah, an orientation. I think maybe we could instead of that we could just have like something to where the teachers or a teacher for every grade goes over like the rules or something like that.
Mhm.
And then I had one more thing, just going up back to the dress code. I was just gonna say, if you are gonna have like a dress code posted, I think just one, like you said, that's like eye catching. Maybe something that's like bold and like simple lettering to where it's like you don't have to sit there and like really analyze it in order to understand what it's saying.
Right.
Where it's like nothing below this and that, right? To where you can just read it and got it. And then I was just gonna also say posting on Google Classrooms would also help because I know a lot of students look on there.
Mhm. And you're at SOAR, right?
Yeah, so Lancaster.
Yeah, and you know, SOAR, I would say because it's like a
Smaller.
college
Yeah,
prep
it's a little
bound, there's a
different,
they, I feel like they're a lot more disciplined there.
I would say so.
So
But they're
it's
still-
not surprising that you mentioned that. Back to my question of loosely worded, what do y'all think of uniforms? Oh, you
One
got
more comment.
Don't cut him short, Carla.
We got 4 topics to talk about. We gotta get through Madam President.
Okay, so just going back to like the planners and stuff, I know like some of the high schools, they don't really use it, but for SOAR, we always use our planners every day. Like our teachers are always like, oh, write this down in your planner and the agenda. And we also, because you know, we're required to take AVID, part of our curriculum. So I think like, I don't know, like it's good that we have them. And we also use them for like binder check and stuff. So
Yeah,
we
and
always do.
And at AVC, I teach SOAR high school students, and they're the best note takers in the entire class because they're being taught and disciplined to learn how to take notes so that advances. But that's not across the board, it's sounding like, and that is also not an equitable look in my eyes. So, but that's good to hear.
And, you know, we're getting up in the morning, getting ready together. She's definitely more concerned about the clothes she's wearing. You know, she's going over asking my mom if she feels a shirt isn't appropriate because her teachers are on her about the dress code. So I think there definitely is a difference there.
So, you know, hopefully getting to a time of consistency, firm, fair, and consistent. I like that.
Yeah, actually to add on to that, I've had a personal experience with that. I was genuinely concerned definitely my junior year of of my junior year of high school. Because I personally got outed for dress coded and it was actually like an outfit exactly what I'm wearing right now. And it was just a term of like I did mature faster and I had to end up missing almost half of my first period, which definitely kind of like ruined the whole like we have to not be a distraction, but this also took away from my education. And I remember I had to wait like about 20 minutes to speak to the vice principal about why I was being dress coded because I genuinely didn't understand. And there was no really anything about, you know, like, oh, you shouldn't wear this or should wear that.
So, Mr. Nehan, is there a way to get statistics of how many dress code violations we've had, even if it's this particular school year per site? And then also, so you're telling me based on all of your experiences that if there's a dress code violation and you're in class, then you're actually being extracted from class. It's not just a simple, you're out of dress code, tomorrow will do better. It's not that. It's you're extracted from your education to then go maybe sit in an office.
It's not you at all. Like we don't really, but when I was a freshman, I could definitely remember like if there was somebody out of dress code, the teacher wasn't doing it. They were calling security to come get you out of class, which is way more distracting than whatever they're wearing.
Right, absolutely. Okay, so I really do want to hear your answer about the uniforms. Would that be something that you feel is easier, is more effective, or really is it about figuring out the enforcement and communication of what to wear to school as a minor?
I have a question on this, and if we do decide having a uniform, will they be paying or supplying for the uniform? Because some students can't go out of the way and afford those uniforms. So, but that was something the students talked about in the room, that will they be paying or supplying the uniforms for the students?
Well, I would think if we, as a district, were requiring something, which we're not, everyone, don't panic, don't panic, don't panic.
Yeah, don't leave here. and
Yeah,
Start spreading the
don't
wildfire.
rumors. This is a conversation, right? I would think, in my personal opinion, that if the district is requiring like a polo, you can wear jeans, whatever you want on the bottom, but you have to wear a polo. Let's just say, or a t-shirt, Eastside High School, whatever, that we would have to provide that if that's what we're requiring. I am a product of uniforms, and it was the easiest thing of my life. I didn't have to worry about it. I was there, never dress code violation. I mean, maybe when I was in middle school, like the skirt was a little higher than it should have been, that kind of thing. But but the uniform, I don't know, because this bothers me that you're saying that you personally, what was your name? Valerie, that you were extracted from your education for 20 minutes because you were wearing what you were wearing now. So it's a continuing conversation. And everybody, please know this isn't the last time we're going to have these sort of open discussions and dialogues. So I hope that this is just the beginning of many. But it's really good to hear what you're thinking right now of dress code violation or dress code policies. Okay.
One piece in there,
Yeah.
when I was reading through it, I feel like there was a line that said, like, if your parent or guardian didn't want you to wear it, then you could get that approved. I think that's worse than picking between clothes or uniforms, because now you have kids that are being forced to wear the uniform and kids that their parents exempted them, they can wear whatever they want. Like, I don't.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think if we would have to be consistent, right? I mean, sure, there's always exceptions, but it would be a very strategic conversation. It would not be a decision we make lightly, of course. But in the interim, we have a soon to be hopefully approved revised current dress code that we have to worry about now.
Yeah.
So this is what I'm concerned with. And then, I don't know what can happen in the next year or two, but we have to get to a place where what a person wears does not take away from their learning, whatever that can be interpreted as. Regardless of your gender, regardless of your height, your size, it doesn't matter, right? So, okay, I'm going to move on to the next, and I'm going to actually skip to, because I think this will be a shorter discussion, and it's about this idea of, I'm putting it in quotes, that a town hall. So when I was speaking with John Lloyd and Mrs. Mann was with me and Mr. Nehan, I was asking John Lloyd, when do y'all have a chance to talk to each other from the site? And he was saying, well, not really much, because ICC, certainly that's where a lot of the concerns and feedback comes from. But when it comes within each campus, there's not so many open dialogue or circle discussions of concerns. How can our environment be safer? How can we engage more? How can we do better in math? Those kinds of very open dialogues. So I wanted to ask you all, what would you think if we started doing student-led dialogue, town hall, talk circles? I don't know what we would call them, something creative. Bulldogs bark circle. I don't know. But it would be a place that whoever your ASB president is or vice president can have, whether it's through a lunch period or maybe an after school or something like that, an hour to talk with your peers that aren't going to come to your ICC meetings and that are not a part of ICC. They're just somebody that's a student, but actually wants to learn or is not learning and it's like, hey, nobody's listening to me, that sort of thing. What would you all think about that opportunity?
The only issue I believe that would bring up is the fact that people wouldn't be as comfortable. I feel like we're all comfortable enough to say what we feel because we're in these positions, but I would assume it'd be the same group of people still bringing up their opinions.
Well, and we wouldn't be there.
Well, yes, I understand.
Okay, it would just be with the student population.
I
And
just
then
feel like there's would still be the same population of students going to these events that are comfortable enough rather than your ordinary student who's just going day by day.
And so how do you think we can engage those people that are not as,
Okay. I just to throw on to that, I think I agree with her. It would be the same type of students. Like we would just go up there. So something maybe would be a survey that again you put through different like we have a third period like during certain weeks we have habitudes. And so that's where information is supposed to be thrown out. It's not always, but it should be. And through that we have surveys sometimes that we do for the district and kids are usually required to do them. So through that, that might be a way to get their voices out because kids are not going to say things. And at the end of the day, more kids are always obviously going to say things than others, but that would probably be the best way to engage them because just asking them to come after school, they're not going to go after school to go talk. It's going to be the same kids who usually speak up who do.
which is here anyway, right?
Yeah. So a
So-
survey maybe.
So a survey that is already being done, maybe you add a student component at the end, like that, or questions that you want to know the answers to, not necessarily we want to know the answers to.
Yeah, I think it
potentially.
would, I think it would work to have like a town hall sort of thing too. Like just having the group of students come together, maybe ASB officers, people who can bring up concerns, because I do think that it helps because we can hear different things from my friend group and, you know, the people that I surround myself with. But giving everybody an opportunity, I think just through surveys, you get kids through doing easy things that just isn't a big task. Like
Okay,
filling out something if they want to do, if they
Yeah.
want to do that, would give them.
okay.
Yeah, and definitely being like surrounded so much by technology, it could be a requirement that teachers have to say assign their students in a Google Classroom, like take the survey. And there could even be a question if you're interested in joining a like little town hall with the students, like, well, based off those numbers, that's when we could actually see if we could actually do something with that number of students we have. And just based on the level of concerns, actually communicate through everyone.
Yeah, okay. Last comment.
I also believe that it maybe shouldn't be held after school because a lot of students, including us, have obligations
Yeah,
after school. So maybe both lunch periods or
okay,
an assigned like class period that they can go to, just
Uh-huh.
because after school would bring up more difficulty.
yeah. So yeah, that makes sense during the school time. Okay. All right, good. That's all really great stuff to think about and consider. So I know we have 20 minutes. We have two more topics to talk about. The cell phone policy that is coming up. I want to hear your thoughts on cell phones. Now we have a policy already in place, but we're not enforcing it. I've been into these schools and nobody's enforcing it. Okay, maybe some people are enforcing it, but what I've seen is not consistent with the policy. So as you know, or maybe you don't, but the state of California now has a law that each school district must create a policy of cell phone uses outside of the room, paraphrasing big time. I have thoughts, but I also want to hear your thoughts on cell phones. And remember, not about, oh, but I want to be on social media. No, it's about your learning. So how are cell phones impacting your learning?
Some of the students have talked about this in the room, and what some of them said was having the lockers, like putting our technology in a locker or backpack in a locker. Someone also brought up pockets, like putting a cell phone in a pocket, a cell packet, and a reward system would be tardy passes or late work, etc. People also thought about the medical devices that people might need beside them. People talked about students using their phones for assignments, like taking a picture of their essay to submit or an assignment that they did, an art piece. Those are some of the students have talked about. If anyone wants to bring up anything or talk about.
So going based off what she said, there's obviously different ways. It is a big issue. There's obviously different ways. Like there's the locks that you put it in the little pocket and it locks at the beginning of the day. We personally all, or not all, but we've came together with the conclusion that maybe lockers in each classroom, like a system that you put your lock in and it's in there and it's visible to you, because I know like I get anxiety if I don't have my phone. So being able to see it and just locking it in during that period will I guess give a relief to students. And during free times, if I have my phone locked up, like that's during lunch. So I think a lot of students would be more likely to not want to turn in their phone because they're not getting it for a whole 8 hours.
So do you think we have passed the point of no return where students are actually connecting with human beings during lunch periods and that sort of thing? And because by saying you want it during lunch, that also is saying that it's like, oh my God, I gotta have it during these 30 minutes
No, I
or
can
whatever.
see that. I mean, what I've seen at my school is not many people are actually on their phones during lunch if they're out. But there's kids who go inside a classroom for lunch. They sit alone, like they want to listen to their music during lunch, and we can't just. I feel like it's hard to assume that they're gonna have somebody to interact with. Some
Right.
people just prefer to be by themselves and they want to, be on their phone for their free time. And so I think giving them during your free time, you can have your phone. They're more likely to listen in a way and actually follow it rather than go against it because they know in 40 minutes, an hour, I'm gonna see my phone again. Because
And you would consider free time lunch, or do you have breaks? Do you have, what
lunch
do you have as
break,
free time?
lunch break, a passing period, but even though it's like 6 minutes, just checking their phone because I know we are addicted to our phones. We want to see the text messages. So just being able to see that and then you put it away again during that class and you know you're gonna see it again. I think just locking it for the whole day, it just gives
So
anxiety.
you feel like a policy of just unplugging both metaphorically and literally is too much. It's almost as we need to kind of slowly do this because maybe in 3 years students will be like, I don't even want the phone anymore because I'm reading a book.
Yeah, I think just if we ask students to lock your phone when you come in, I can imagine that students just aren't gonna lock their phone. They might put a different phone in there or something.
Right.
There might be more issues with that because students are addicted to their phones. And so 8 hours, I feel might be a lot for a lot of students to.
Well, and I guess that's the bigger question is how do we help our society get unaddicted to these devices? Because there's data and stats out there. It's ruining your eyes. You're not developing the same way as previous generations. I know you all have been born with cell phones. Cell phones weren't around when I was young. Definitely not around when he was young.
They
were so tied to
I
the
just
wall.
turned 56, thank you.
So
Never getting a pager, that would be cool.
the pagers, yeah.
Yeah, doing a little.
So,
Nine.
and especially this is education, right? I mean, you are going to school to learn. Technology's here, AI is here. We can't ignore that. We have to embrace it. But how do we find our balance?
One thing I can tell you for sure from my experience of going to high school for about 4 years now is I will not be on my phone if a teacher is actually interacting with me instead of just giving me a packet and telling me, oh, read this material, do this homework, and you're gonna get graded at the end of the day. When I know for a fact that I'm sitting in a classroom and I have a teacher engaging with me and actually teaching me properly, nobody has a reason to be on their phone. Another concern that I got, when you eliminate all phones, like she said, putting it in a pouch, not see it till the end of the day. A concern that came up to me is a lot of kids do have diabetes, do have pacemakers, and it is connected to their phone nowadays.
Yeah, and we're not talking about those cases,
Okay,
obviously.
okay.
I mean,
But
that's
that
medical
would raise the
necessary.
concern, like you're in a classroom filled with 32 kids, one of these kids has their phone out. That would kind of like, I don't know how to explain it, but
But I don't think you need your phone out to have it for medical needs because my father has one and it'll like vibrate or ding or something. You don't have to, have it out.
right.
So I don't know if I would use that as
Okay.
a fact of matter.
Also, one of the things that I noticed while we've been touring the classrooms is that there's a large amount of students that have ear pods in their ear during class. So I don't see the value of having ear pods in your ear while there's a class going on.
I feel like it's a little more, I think it's taken too seriously by like the teachers and the staff because I can hear perfectly fine with them in. I do understand when it's like kids are completely tuning out, they have noise cancellation. You don't have to hear anything your teacher's saying. But I would say like sometimes I just walk around with them in. I forget that they're in my ear sometimes. And it's more to go out of your way and be like, oh, you need to take those out of your ear than just kind of, I'm clearly engaged, I'm learning, I'm paying attention. I think it's that piece is just taken a little too seriously in my classes because it is a big thing. Like teachers won't start their lessons until everyone has their earbuds out or their headphones off, but it's like I can hear everything. They have like a transparency mode. I can hear everything going on around me. So I don't think it's that
But
big of a
maybe
deal.
you,
Yeah.
but what about all the others? And as a teacher, I don't allow it. I'm like, get them out of your ears. You're here to be with me and I don't know what's going on in here.
Mhm.
You could be listening to the soccer game for all I know.
Mhm.
And it's because you have to trust your students and they haven't, in my personal experience, may not have gotten that there yet. So, I mean, I hear definitely what you're saying, but at the end of the day, the classroom has to be managed.
Mhm.
And we, as a district, have hired hopefully the highest of quality of educator to move you forward.
Mhm.
And there are definitely things we want to work through and work with, but at the end of the day, the policies drive. And if it's a headphone, there could be worse things in life.
Mhm.
You know what I'm saying? And when you're working at a job, you're not going to be able to have your headphones on.
Mhm.
I mean, maybe if you're an air traffic controller, you're going to have the
Yeah.
the headphones on, but we're also trying to get you ready for the real world, and real world is connecting to human beings as well. So I think where I'm struggling is trying to understand how do we get you unaddicted to the phones and in the learning environment, because teachers use their phones too. I know this, and that is a problem. So why are we telling you all to not use the phones and then the teachers are there with their feet up? I've seen it.
Yeah.
So again, consistency. Go ahead.
Based on like in my personal like experience, I haven't really grown up to be on my phone a lot. I'm a person with very low screen time. But as like talking to everyone about phone policy and everything, I believe that it's very like kind of what she said about like having it visually, but like not with you. I think it's really important because as well, like I'm also very busy. We all have a lot of activities and sometimes we have to stay after school and we have to let our parents know right there, or even family situations that you have to like. And I feel like one of the big things should be that if there is a policy based on it, like locked, we should be able to unlock it if there is an important reason or need. Other than that, I feel like it's okay to have the phones away and locked up. Like that's my personal opinion. And also with basically like the whole like medical situation, like I feel like definitely that's doable with that type of system.
Did you want to say something in the back? Go ahead.
I would also like to say that having a phone in the pocket would also conflict with our college schedule because having it in the pocket all day, for us in Sor Palmdale, we have an annex center, which is our main learning center, and ABC Palmdale Center. So we had to walk all the way to ABC Palmdale and get to our class and still have our phone in our pouch, which kind of seems unfair in a way for us because as other schools, they just have one high school and go to the passing periods, but we had to walk to the ABC Center, and we also sometimes have to take the bus too. On Friday schedules, we had to go to our main campus and the Annex Center. So not having our phones on the bus seems, unreliable and like kind of like I don't know how to explain that part, but yeah.
Yeah, and that's definitely consideration. We would have to look at all individual campuses' unique circumstances because I understand that. But can we at least have a consensus here that we have to do something about the cell phones because you're not learning maybe what you could be learning? I mean, I just look at the scores of our district. So we have to find a way.
So actually something too my teachers do. is we have a cell phone pocket. That's why we brought up the idea. And it's optional. So we have this red, yellow, and green light. And whenever the light's on red, your phone goes in the pocket. And if you voluntarily put it in the pocket, then you get money to go into your class bank. And that can be used to get a project pass or a homework pass, or you want to turn in late work, you can buy it. And 2 of my teachers use it, and really none of the kids don't comply. They all go put their phone up there because we can see it in front of us. We're not using it, we're doing work, and it works well. Now, I will say it is our senior classes. Those kids tend to be a little more willing to comply to the classroom rules, but it does work. And I feel like the whole like cold turkey, let's take the phones away. I don't think it's fair because it is our property at the end of the day, or our parents' property at
Sure.
least. So it
Yeah.
is a problem, but I think that's a bit extensive.
Well, and it's interesting because one of the school
the
district.
Lancaster School District, so I was with the Lancaster School District when we passed the pouches.
Mhm.
So we started off with all the schools getting pouches. Now, what we did was we did a soft rollout. So it was like, put your phone away or we'll take it away.
Mhm.
And you'll put it in the pouch and you will not have access to it until the end of the day.
Mhm.
So that was pretty successful. I haven't seen, sometimes the kids will leave and forget to unlock the pouch.
Yeah.
So then they come back with damaged bags. So, but at the end of the day, the elementary schools and the middle schools are also rolling out the policy that by the time that those kids hit high school, that policy is already ingrained. So that maybe the shock will be it won't affect you because you're seniors, because you'll be in college now. Or jobs. It might affect the juniors, might have a little bit of a culture shock, the sophomores that are going to be juniors, but it eventually fade out. So you have to start somewhere.
Because it's the law.
Yeah.
And obviously I can't speak for everyone in every school, but from what I heard from them, they actually don't work that well because they can get the phone out, like they can't wait to lock it. So I don't know.
It's a magnet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When there's a will, there's a way.
Yeah.
Better to find a way to help the kids understand why the phone needs to go away than just like, hey, you're gonna put it in.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good segue into our last point, because I know we have 5 minutes.
But
Do you want to say something?
Just to say one last thing. Go ahead. And
Okay, I was just gonna say real quick that I think also something to consider is that phones is gonna be with us outside of school and when we get out, like graduate. And I think important part of like, you bring up the point of preparing us for the real world. I think we also need to be prepared to have our phone, to have that distraction, to be able to still be able to focus, knowing that we have that distraction with us. If I go through high school without my phone or having it always taken away from me, and then I get a job and now I have my phone with me all the time, I won't be disciplined to be able to be like, well, now I'm gonna put my phone away. I'm gonna be like, oh, this is new. I wanna, that's what I'm saying. Maybe starting with the pouch where you put the phone in, because also high schoolers, not all of them, but a decent amount are mature to where they'll understand if you explain it in the right way that, okay, I'm put my phone in this pouch. I will get it at lunch or whatever break I have, passing period. And like, once they do that enough, it'll become a habit. But that's the point I wanted to bring up.
So what I heard, I don't know who said it, but what I heard was a room locker. That way it's visible. Whoever said that, yeah, that was a good idea. So the pouches was probably the baby steps, but I think the lockers is probably the way to go, especially with the SOAR students who have to travel from one campus to another. And to have it when they get into the room, it's like, there is a locker here.
Mr. Hughes, go ahead, and then I have something to say real quick.
So I'm a business owner, right? And I own a restaurant. And you think, okay, it's not NASA or anything like that. I have a cell phone policy. So if I have waiters and waitresses out there on their cell phones, you guys are trying to order, do you see how that's problematic? And that's just, I'm just run a restaurant. If you're going to work for NASA or you're going to go into a prison system and work in where I grew up in, a bank, you're not going to have cell phones. I mean, there's my daughter went to West Point. She worked in a certain area where they have to drop their cell phone even before they go into the building. You work over at Northrop and NASA or
Security.
Lockheed, you will never have your cell phone while you're working for that 8, 10, 12-hour day. So you guys are going up through this. This is a change, but I agree with Miss Mann. Pretty soon, because this is the law, they're not even going to know about cell phones because there's going to be some system, some way that it's going to take the cell phone from you. So I understand.
And live
I
with it.
look, I'm addicted. Sometimes I watch my TikTok videos too. So full disclosure.
Notice whose phone isn't on the desk.
So I get it. And security. I mean, I grew up, I mean, I worked in a prison system for 26 years and we, confiscated cell phones and all that stuff. And they still was a way to get them in. It was crazy. We won't get into all that. But anyway, what I'm saying is there's gonna be certain places, and especially you guys. I mean, you guys are amazing. I mean, I'm so impressed on how you guys can articulate and explain your positions. I'm just thoroughly amazed. Our staff are doing a great job with you. I can tell you that. So give you some applause. I'm very impressed. But you got to come to realizing you guys are going to go into those type of jobs. I mean, you're going to be to those jobs where you're not going to have your cell phone, and it's going to be a culture shock. Watch. You think a judge is going to let you, when you're an attorney going there arguing a case, you're going to have your cell phone? So, Your Honor, I'm going to take this call. That is never going to happen.
Sorry.
Right. So you guys are going to get those high level jobs. I already know you guys are going to be in those professions potentially where you're not going to have cell phones. So I get it, but we have to make decisions here. We have to make really good decisions on the distraction. And I think we all agree that there's lots of distractions on how we're implementing the cell phones today, both on our teachers and both on the students. You guys would agree with that, correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And then I know we have a minute, but I did want to ask, what is the name of the teacher that had the sample red, yellow, blue, green? Mr. Johnson. Okay. Because I love that, because you know what that shows? Trust and culture and respect. Exactly. So if we instill this from the beginning consistently, then maybe we can see a slow shift, because we have to have a culture shift, because I don't want it to feel punitive. And that's how I know a lot of you feel like this is this punitive. Taking it away from me. So we didn't get to our last discussion, but it is about campus climate. So hopefully the next time that we all meet, no, we haven't, we need an hour. That we can talk about just campus climate. I want you all to think about it, maybe at your next ICC meeting, Emily, if you can pass the message of how can we make you feel safer at your schools beyond the mechanics, devices.
I got that. We're getting
Yeah, I mean, we've got the security, all that stuff. I'm talking about behavior within people, humans, right? The human behavior. And just, what are you learning in classrooms? The idea that you're just handed a packet is very disturbing to me. Especially if it's all the time. If you got a packet maybe once a week, because every Thursday you get a packet, different. It's very disturbing as a fellow educator, right? So we're going to have to look at the pedagogy, which is the way we teach, and have much higher conversations than we can have in this room right now. But the honesty is what we need. I need to know, what's your name? Isa. I need to know, is this only your experience or maybe other people? So, okay. And if you all are nodding your heads, imagine all the other students that are also nodding their heads. That is a problem. Okay.
Slides in Google Classroom, it's like looking at it up on Google. How do I even know they're gonna factor a website? Oh my God.
Right. Well, and I think teachers, and again, it's a very, very great area of, we've been told, let's use all the technology and the tools, and we're investing hundreds of thousands of dollars in software and all these things. But at what point do we have to say enough? Let's go back to the basics of teaching and engaging.
Let's bring back the encyclopedias.
Let's bring back books, people. Let's bring back going to the library at second period. I mean, when was the last time you all were in a library?
Let's not.
She's over there. I've been.
I mean, yeah.
I know where
is a
it
thing.
is.
So, okay,
I know where
everybody,
it is,
sorry,
so.
we went off track there. But all this to say that we are here for you. The 5 of us board members are so passionate about the role we've have the privilege of being in. Education is the wave of the future, whether it's to college or to a career workforce. So please know that any concern you have, you can reach out to the 5 of us directly or me directly.
I want to piggyback on that. This board that I sit with up here is truly amazing. I got to tell you, we don't have agendas. We're not coming here trying to change the world. What we want to do is just be the best guiders to our administrator, to our superintendent, because we have one employee, that's him. And he's a great leader. I'm very impressed with him. And I can tell you this, wants the best for you guys. That's what we want. There's no agendas up here. We just want to know what you need that we can provide. And we'll work really hard to provide that. So I'm very impressed with you guys. Amazing, of course. But thank you for coming and sharing. Yes.
This meeting is agendized and we do have an agenda for this meeting. So just to clarify, that piece, we'll talk about when we get to the Brown Act, but each of you don't have individual agendas. This meeting has been agendized.
When I say agenda.
Yeah, he has to be specific.
Let me clarify.
Rewind,
We do
Mr.
not have
Hughes.
our attorney here. What I'm talking about is us as individual board members are like, we're not, I'm here to do something crazy. No, we're just here because we want the best for our students and we want to produce the greatest kids possible. And we want to be part of that. So, and that's it.
And you have access to us. If you want my email, just come and ask me, or Mr. Nehan or somebody could give you an email. I have had students email me directly. And that's really important to me because I don't know if any of you are 18, but maybe your parents have voted for us on this board. So we are here for you, right? So again, I'm hoping we can do this. I would love to before the end of the school year. I don't know if it's possible, but if not, then I certainly look forward to working with you all in maybe the summer. We're hoping to do a leadership day in the summer. I think John Lloyd has mentioned that to you. I want you all to be as prepared as possible as emerging leaders. So with that said, we will close out this and, oh yes. It was campus climate. Campus climate, and what I mean by that specifically is just the safety, the whole classrooms, the parking lots, the yard, the events. Yeah, and where the tensions, gangs, racial tensions, education. I don't know how to read. I do know how to read. Like anything that is campus, do you feel respected by your teachers? Are you respected by each other? Just a very big area of camp. Yes. And, the fall survey kind of gets to that campus climate, but now I want to hear directly from the students.
And I'd like to see if we can get any feedback as far as motivating other students other than yourselves, but through all ages, all of the the freshman, the sophomore, the senior. What is stopping somebody from saying, I want you to help me? Like, what is it? How is it that we can get more of the students involved? You're leaving a legacy, and all it is just repetitive from one year to the next. Is there bullying that we need to address? Is there people, I don't know. That's one of the things about the cell phone is that social media can be very destructive to a young person. So that's what I'm looking for as far as climate. Like, what is it that how can we unify more of the students and include more of the students that aren't all A students?
And I want you to know that we all are listening to all the concerns and to all of your different opinions. So we understand, we want to understand, and we want to have your point of perspective. I know Mr. Hughes said that he has a cell phone policy, no policy. I own multiple businesses too. And the people that work at my restaurants can have their cell phones. My accountants can have their cell phones. My handyman can have their cell phones. My entire staff can have their cell phones. But with great responsibility comes power. And if you violate or you do something, you're on your cell phone, you're not working, you just get fired. Bye-bye. So I think I would rather have a policy. Because, you know, it is what it is. You're not doing your job.
Yes, and you know, we probably will talk about this. We probably will talk about this again because I think there's a lot more we can all say. But I'm gonna go ahead and move to item 2, public business from the floor, closed session agendized items. Are there any comments from the public on closed session agendized items?
No comments from the public?
The Board of Trustees will go into closed session and reconvene at 7:30. Thank you. Yes, can we take a photo before y'all get out of here?
Okay, we have to come around behind.
Yes.
So they can set up. Does that work for you guys? You want to up on the day or you want to?
Selfies.
It's like we were wearing like shorts. Like I've had Zoom meetings like that. I'm like with the student and tie and everything, but down below is like just shorts.
And do you see these powerful women sitting on this board? I always remember saying that. Miguel and I.
Cynthia went. Oh, you can come in. Cynthia was leaving. She's like, I'm out. Like, peace out. Sorry. So we're just.
Yeah, hey, how you doing? Nice.
Hello.
Hey, how you doing, Kevin?
Thank you so much.
Do I just press this button to turn it off?
Thank you. We're going to reconvene the regular meeting. The board took no action in closed session. Moving to B, public comments from the floor for agendized items. Are there any comments from the public on agendized items?
We have no comments on agendized items.
Okay. We're going to move to C, public comments from the floor for non-agendized items. Are there any comments from the public for non-agendized items?
Yes, I have one.
I'm going to go ahead and hold until Mr. Sanchez and Mrs. Hernandez comes back. All right, so we are at the public comments from the floor for non-agendized items. Ms. Kimberly Barker. And the topic is SOAR Prep and Charter School Lottery. Welcome.
Thank you. Is it okay to begin?
Oh, yes. Good evening. Begin. Yes.
Thank you. Good evening, members of the board. My name is Kimberly Barker. I've had many titles and roles in my life. Tonight, I stand before you not as professor, not as developmentalist or education specialist, not as doctor of education or even child and family advocate. I'm here in my most important role, parent. At our last board meeting, I shared my concerns regarding the lack of transparency in the lottery process for SOAR Prep Academy. Since then, I have not received any communication or resolution from anyone in the district. This lack of follow-up raises alarm bells about the accountability of our educational institutions. It is essential that we prioritize transparency in all aspects of the lottery process, especially for the charter school that serves our community's children. California law mandates that charter schools provide accessible and timely information regarding their lotteries, including the time and location of such events. The California Education Code Section 47605 outlines the requirements for charter school admissions and emphasizes the need for fairness and transparency. Yet it appears that these guidelines have not been adequately followed. Moreover, I am deeply concerned that the same practices may have been experienced by parents at additional charters, a concern worth addressing. As we have heard over the years about the overwhelming demand for spots in these schools with only 100 seats available for incoming seventh graders, it is perplexing that instead of considering expansion to accommodate the needs of our community, leadership has opted to implement additional barriers, such as prioritizing military families. While we must honor and respect our military families, we cannot overlook those families who have already invested time, energy, and resources into the school, building connections and relationships that are essential for a nurturing educational environment. Furthermore, I urge you to consider adding a legacy clause to the renewal documents, giving siblings past students the opportunity to attend the same school. Research has shown that keeping sibling continuity in educational institutions can greatly benefit their emotional and social well-being. A study published in the Journal of Educational Psychology found that continuity for siblings in
30 seconds.
Students experience less anxiety, higher education performance. I ask you to contemplate this. Why are we not looking to expand a clearly needed institution for our children instead of perpetuating barriers? We should be fostering an inclusive environment that honors family legacy. In closing, I implore you to take these concerns seriously. Our children deserve the best educational opportunities available, and it is our responsibility to advocate for transparency, fairness, and the well-being of students. Thank you for your attention, and I hope to see a commitment to change moving forward.
Thank you. Did you have a comment? Question,
just-
clarification?
I don't have clarification, just some little discussion amongst the board. I mean, just a little discussion. Mr. Meehan, we did the military change on our enrollment. And that was due to some of the orders, because it wasn't the orders coming in. Sword prep, yes.
But yeah, it has to do, that particular piece has to do with the timing of the orders at a reserve.
Yes, and then it'd be like if they weren't there for they didn't transfer in, they could miss an opportunity or something, right? Okay. All right. And I mean, I know the speaker talked about that we're not trying to expand. I don't believe that that's the case. I think we are trying to expand, correct?
There's the potential to expand down the line. Bond allows us some flexibility. That would be.
And we had discussions on that before too. So I just wanted to make sure that it is our goal to expand. So, okay. All right. Thank you.
And Mr. Meehan, for clarification, per the last meeting, I asked about, it was on the website. So can you tell us if this information was on the website?
So the date of the lottery, once the application was submitted, the date of the lottery showed, and it was posted on the website. However, the time and place was not posted, and that'll be rectified in subsequent lotteries.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Parker.
Thank you.
All right, moving to D, employee conference trip reimbursement schedule. It is recommended that the Board of Trustees approve the attached schedule for encumbrances and or reimbursements. Can I have a motion?
Motion.
Can I get a second? Any discussion? Seeing none? Motion passes. Oh, we have to vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. And now we're moving into our governance work study E. The board and superintendent will participate in a governance work study presented by Mr. McLaughlin from AALR.
With
R.
another R.
Lots of L's and R's. Good evening. And this is really great that you're here. And we're gonna just learn. So.
Okay, great. Thank you.
All right, does everyone have a copy at this point? Perfect. All right, so I know I just kind of bull rushed my way into it. I should probably introduce myself first. My name's Paul McLaughlin. I am partners with Mr. Willis. I know that you regularly see Jabari here, so I'm pinch hitting for him. I hope that I'm a worthy substitute. He's a big person to live up to. So I am in our Pasadena office. I've worked with the firm since 2008. And my general practice really consists of human resources related matters and then general counsel related matters. So a lot of what we're going to talk about today is things that come up just as part of general governance. And when I mean governance, I'm talking mainly about effective and respective roles of the board, of the superintendent, how we conduct meetings, just everything that kind of touches upon what you do as a board. And I did put in a brief overview of the Brown Act. Brown Act could be a 2-hour presentation unto itself. I'm not going to do a 2-hour presentation on that for you tonight. There are going to be also some discussions about some ethical considerations we're going to talk about. You may have heard about the new requirement that just came in January 1st, 25. It's a 2-hour ethical training. You have time to get it done. I think it's for anyone whose office ends later than 2026. So we got some time. It's something that is a full 2 hours. I'm not going to spend a full 2 hours with you either. So where I'm coming from is just really a dive into your board bylaws. A lot of what you'll see is I dove into your board bylaws just to get a sense of what's going on with what's on paper, and kind of typical to a lot of school districts in the state. California School Boards Association has a model set of bylaws, and Antelope Valley High School District pretty much follows that. So there's not going to be too many big surprises out of maybe not too many surprises out of what you're going to hear from me tonight. So just a rundown quickly of our agenda. We're going to go over some general governance concepts and an overview of the board bylaws. So what I tried to do, we're going to start with some generalized concepts, the first 3 slides or so. Then from there, I tried to marry concepts with actual board bylaws. So we have some of the source material that we can go to anytime that you can refer back to as well. So we're going to do that. And we're also going to talk a little bit about communications and social media, just because that can be a bit of a tricky area when we're talking about the limitations on communications. What can we communicate? What should we communicate? And social media, because we do have some fairly new laws surrounding social media. You may have heard AB 992 out there. That's something that's relatively new within the last 4 years or so. And then we're going to go over, like I said, an overview of the Brown Act and your related board bylaws as well. So I do like to say right at the beginning of this is a study session. I have no pride in terms of being interrupted. You're not going to hurt my feelings if you want to ask a question, and we can kind of go through that anytime. We don't have to wait till the end. I know I put questions, answers, discussion at the end, but I'm not going to hold you to it. You can ask away anytime, any point in the conversation. Please feel free. All right. So just to kick off, some general governance topics that come up frequently when we're talking about, what's the role of the board, and what does the board do, and what's the board's relationship with staff, and primarily the superintendent. That's the closest, most important relationship between the board and any employee of the district, is the superintendent. So put this up just as a general governance standard. Board members work with each other and the superintendent to ensure a high quality education is provided to each student. That's why you all ran. That's why we're all here. That's our end goal. So you just put together several just key general concepts in terms of governance. We want to keep learning and achievement for all students as the primary focus. We value, support, and advocate for public education. We recognize and respect differences of perspective and style on the board and among staff, students, parents, and the community. That's one of the great parts of governance that we have, is that we can have differing opinions and we can talk about them, and we can hopefully come to a consensus when we're talking about that. We act with dignity and understand the implications of demeanor and behavior, keep confidential matters confidential. I'm not going to read everything to you, but these just generalized concepts that you're going to see later kind of get built into a lot of your board bylaws. And when I talk about board bylaws, we're talking about like board policies, administrative regulations, and board bylaws. So if you go on your website, you go find where those are stored on your website. You have board policies and administrative regulations, very specific to the operations of the district itself. Board bylaws are in that series 9,000. So it's at the very bottom of the list in board docs. And board bylaws are basically how the board governs itself. And you can find pretty much everything we're going to talk about as part of this presentation within those bylaws. So generally, what are board roles and responsibilities when we're talking about governance issues? Those roles and responsibilities are distinct from those of superintendent and staff. So what do I mean by that? We're talking about board members being equal in authority, the five of you working as one. No one individual board member has any power on their own over any of the other individuals. So the board sets policy, vision, and goals and direction. So you're thinking 30,000-foot view, you're going to have a strategic plan, you're going to have specific things that you want to see implemented by staff. That's our role as the board. The superintendent then implements that policy, and they do that through delegation to appropriate executive departments. So that's the main difference is we have the vision, the goals, and then the executive, how those are executed. So the board does not manage or direct day-to-day operations. They're certainly involved and aware of what's going on, but the day-to-day operations and the running of the district itself is the superintendent and executive cabinet's role. Oop, did I freeze? Sorry about that. The next slide, I guess it's a decent place to freeze. It's just a very generalized graph of that concept. So, we have the Board of Education at the top, superintendent, and then executive cabinet. What we say, Board of Education is setting policy, vision, goals, direction, and you hire and evaluate the superintendent. And from there, the superintendent makes recommendations, they delegate and supervise, they liaise between the board and the stakeholders, and recommends candidates for executive cabinet and administration. So it's your top level executive within the body. That's your employee. And then from there, the superintendent has various cabinet members, the executive cabinet that implements the directives delegated by the superintendent and supervises the day-to-day operations of each department. So just a quick infographic to refer back to. So protocols, what do I mean when we talk about protocols? That really gets into the bylaws. It's our specific rules about how we self-govern. So these are protocols we've agreed to and upheld, and that's by the board and superintendent to provide transparency and ensure productive working relationship among all of our stakeholders. It's how we implement that general goal and how we execute it. So this is again just kind of the driving force between the protocols that we're going to talk about. A lot of the specific board bylaws kind of touch upon these 5 different subjects. We're talking about unity of purpose, confidentiality, compliance with the Brown Act, and that's why we're talking about this. Brown Act is our driving force behind all of our meetings. It's what we're thinking about constantly. And district policies and bylaws, including observer proper roles and giving full attention to proceedings, respecting and supporting the majority vote of the board. The board technically acts by majority rule. So we have 5, 3 of you say yay or nay, the majority rules. That's just how we operate under the education code, very specific statute that we're going to talk about later, but 3 out of 5, you get consensus. That's what we're going with. And then listening to and considering other points of view. It's nice to have, with especially tough decisions, to have varying points of view, creates lively discussion, all brings you to a good informed decision that's been thoroughly vetted. That's really the basis, not to get too patriotic on you, like why we have democracy and elected officials. It's just so you all are representing your various constituents, your various points of view, having that lively debate and ultimately coming to a decision. All right, so enough of the general stuff. Now I can get to really the specifics about what's going on in Antelope Valley Union High School District. So from here, we're going to be talking about and referring to specific board bylaws. And so have some free time, later on, not necessarily after the meeting. Don't want to run it too late, but just if you feel compelled, every one of these bylaws, I double checked them just to make sure that they were consistent, because there are some districts that vary a little bit. For the most part, all the board bylaws are about the same in all throughout the state. And that's just because California School Boards Association, they put out all the model bylaws that kind of dictate how a lot of business is conducted. So the one I start with is Board Bylaw 9000, and that's just kind of our general concept of what we as the board, how we're going to operate and conduct business. And so going back to our general concepts, this kind of implements that. So the board shall work with the superintendent to fulfill its major roles. So generally speaking, setting the direction for the district through a process that involves communities, parents, guardians, students, and staff, and focused on student learning and achievement. So this is right out of our board bylaw. So it establishes effective and efficient organizational structure for the district by any number of activities there. So these are all pulled just directly out of the board bylaw. It's much more detailed, 9,000 actually. There's quite a bit of information in there. So I'd really encourage you just to check that out again in your free time. There's a lot of good stuff within that particular one. So there are some specific areas, we're talking generally about vision, goals, concepts, and how we implement those. So I listed 5 specific ones that get a little bit more, into more detail when we're talking about implementing that more general vision. So we're going to talk a little bit in depth about some more of these later. But the ones that I pulled specifically, your agenda development. That happens in advance and specifically within your board bylaws between the board president and superintendent. So that's something that is called out specifically. Preparation for and attendance at meetings. I've attended a few of your meetings. I've never had concern that you're not preparing for them. It's written in your board bylaws. I only mention it just because it's in there. This has been a really solidly functioning board. Proper use of closed sessions and adherence to confidentiality. We're going to get a little bit into this with Brown Act considerations, but confidentiality in our closed sessions and properly having those closed sessions is really paramount. There are lots of different ways we can get into closed session. There's a lot of what we call safe harbor language in the Brown Act. So everything that we talk about in closed session stays confidential, and that's written directly into our governance rules. Discretion, this was an interesting one. Discretion to table items to avoid late night meetings. Without cheating, do any of you know what the general guideline in our board bylaw is in terms of when our meetings end? 10:30. Yeah, give yourself an extra 30 minutes. So, so you do have the power to table items, not saying that you have to, but the board has said it's important to us to end our meetings by 10:30 whenever feasible. Just an interesting point that I just wanted to put out. Effective and efficient board meetings with appropriate public comment, and you do have a very robust public comment in particular board bylaw. A lot of districts do through their board bylaws through CSBA's model policy. And we're going to talk a little bit about public comment specifically a little bit later. Sets the goals for the district, and it also has a board self-evaluation. So if you look at, I think it's 9400 was the one. It's the very last one on the list. It talks about a board self-evaluation process. So I'm not sure if you've gone through that process yet or something that you're considering, but that tool is available for you just as a point of interest. All right, so public statements and communications, these are issues that can be really sensitive. However, for the most part, you're all elected officials. You have constituents. You talk to them. You get to talk to them. You are encouraged to talk to them. So, attorneys were kind of trained sometimes to be wet blankets in a bit, in a sense. I just want to preface these conversations with having the communications with your constituents is very important. So I don't want you to take any of what I'm saying as saying don't talk to anyone. So I point this out because we do have a specific board bylaw on public statements and communications. So it's 9010. Just some of the general rules to pull out of that. So board members are free to express personal views in their role as community leaders. You're leaders out there in the community. You can express personal views and participate in public discourse on matters of civic or community interest. Your role in the school board is very important. It's just one facet of you. You're a community member. You got a lot of different things going on. You may have many different interests. You're free to engage in that discourse. It's not something that you can't. As soon as you swear in as a board member, you're allowed to. the particular board bylaw where they get into some of the nuance there is they're saying to ensure communication of a consistent, unified message regarding district-specific issues. Board members are expected to allow public statements to be made by the board president, the superintendent, or other designated representative. So when there's something specific about the board or the district as a whole, your board bylaw directs you to either the board president, superintendent, or designee. The board bylaw also recognizes that statements, board members recognize their statements can be perceived as reflecting the views and positions of the board as a whole, and should identify personal viewpoints as their own and not those of the board. If you're speaking out, you can certainly have your own viewpoint. Like I said, it's great to have a rich discussion where you have multiple viewpoints. If your viewpoint differs from the majority of the board bylaw 9010 says you should be making that clear. Okay, so just some additional commentary on statements and communications. I say there's additional potential for serial meetings. And what do I mean by that? And we'll get into what a serial meeting is more specifically in a few slides. But a serial meeting is basically a series of communications that results in a Brown Act violation. And so if you have 3 or more of you communicating on the same issue and your viewpoints are being communicated specifically on a particular subject, say, there's the potential to have a serial meeting if you have one person kind of collecting those various viewpoints, developing a consensus of what's going on amongst the board outside of a meeting. So it just has that potential. It rarely, if ever, comes up, but just wanted to bring that up as a point. So board member communications in general, they're also likely subject to disclosure under the Public Records Act. And that can include personal devices and accounts. I only bring this up because Public Records Act requests do come in where communications to and from board members come up and people request them. And I just make the general rule of thumb, any communication that you have, just assume it's going to be out in general in the public. You know, there's no such thing as a private communication when you're putting something in writing. How many, has anyone heard of the San Jose case or know what it's generally aware of? So that was a Public Records Act case where someone was seeking documents from city officials in the city of San Jose. And the person who asked for the documents asked for all communications, you know, emails, text messages, etc. And the response was, well, you know, these don't all exist in city issued accounts. And what that case said is, well, no matter where those communications are stored, they're the public's business if you're talking about public business. So it could be in a separate account, it could be on a different device. My general rule of thumb is just to think of every communication that involves district business as public. And that advice has paid dividends for various instances. You know, I was dealing with Public Records Act requests a few weeks ago where they asked for board communications, and thankfully nothing in those communications indicated anything other than interested public officials doing their duties. Nothing bad in those communications. And then just a last point, confidential information should never be transmitted via social media or non-district servers. So as board members, you're going to be privy to sensitive information, confidential information. So if those sorts of communications are happening, they should be going through district channels. Okay, so another.
Well, actually,
Yeah.
If I could just talk for a moment.
Yeah, of course.
To talk with the board about this, because my question or hope is that we can, with the social media,
Mhm.
and because I know you have gone to the different schools and put it out there, and it's really amazing. What I would like to see happen is, can we use the district communication team to do what you're doing? Because because it's not happening.
Sure why
so
we
you
haven't been.
exactly.
I'm not sure why we haven't been.
Exactly, because what she's doing, what Ms. Hernandez is doing social media, like minute videos. I mean, it's like you got a whole film crew out there, right? But I think it puts us in a interesting place because it feels maybe that, you know, she's very high in the social media aspect and then nobody else is. So
Mhm.
it almost puts us in a weird, interesting competition. So I would like to see if we are. I don't know.
Hmm.
I would like to see our district communication team do what Mrs. Hernandez has been able to do in 2 months. And to not get us in this mix, because let's say we have a child in the video and
Mm.
parent didn't give permission, then it just puts us in a very weird place. So
Yes.
would that be okay if we were to do something on that level as board members to say, we still want to do boards in the video, like
Yeah,
maybe follow
absolutely.
around, but that it's coming from the district's video equipment, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and to answer your question directly, I'll give you a direct attorney answer. Yes, absolutely. That's a great idea. And we're going to be talking about some of the reasons why it's a great idea. Just because the social media landscape is it's always evolving and changing. And then the legislature waded into social media about 4 years ago, talking about what you can and can't do on social media, what you should and shouldn't do. And so having a district run, district authorized social media account it is a good way to
Well-
put that in a safe space, for lack of a better
Yeah.
term.
And I think we have one, but what Cynthia's been able to do in 3 videos is remarkable. And
Mhm.
it, you know, and there's the 5 of us, but now I feel like, oh my gosh, I don't have anybody to, you know, and all of our schools should be equally represented. And I can't expect her to go visit all 12 schools and do this great production when we have staff to
Yeah.
do that. So that's something we can talk further about, but what Cynthia is doing is amazing and thank you. And I don't want it to stop. I just want it to come from the district, even if you're the star of the show, you know, like filmed, but to have your equipment and people be the ones to drive, because that is also a communication path. So anyway, again, back to this too of just protecting us.
Carla, I did want to share too that Greg has been really, I want to say my bumper, because he's
Oh.
been very diligent
Oh.
and very overseen. So, and he's very good at talking to Davey, like Davey, you know, so when he's speaking, Davey's listening, he's paying attention.
Davey?
My son.
Oh.
He's the one that, so I am blessed
your
to
film
have
crew.
my film crew, my editor, my social media manager. But it has helped a lot because it was scary. It was very scary. It was very, I'm gonna be honest, it was very scary. It was very scary not blocking those comments. So it was when we've been very careful, and I just want to be very grateful, like I said, to Greg, because as much as it looked like I was being irritated by his guidance, but I really wasn't. I was listening. We were listening, Greg, because we want what is best for the school. And when we walked in there and we're seeing what's happening, it was, oh gosh, why don't people, and Rosemary was with me, she said, why don't more people know about this? I'm not sure, but AB Scanner definitely videotaped the fight in the street 3 blocks away. So that was one of the, so far in 2 months, it has been a little scary of a journey. And I am just as surprised as you are with the amount of support and views we got. It wasn't, we're very surprised. One of the last videos has over 500,000 views. 500,000 views.
That's amazing.
And it was a very positive video. It was, and the principal received a lot of support, but it was scary. So I'm glad that you're doing this because I'm learning to, it's just very uncharted territory, Carla. So I'm glad that this is being done because we want to continue to highlight great things about our schools.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we've seen over and over and over again the effective use of social media, and it's absolutely a powerful tool. And, you know, it's something that has been used very well and very effectively in a lot of districts. So absolutely, I think that's a great point and great conversation to have on that point. Was there anything else on that for now? And there'll be some discussion about that and some of the nuances about you even mentioned, you know, likes and blocking. It's things like that. Things have gotten kind of complicated over the last years as the law catches up to social media. The law in general is always about 5 years behind. I mean, we're talking about like Public Records Act, for example. We're still talking about microfiche, which, you know, for For those of us who are a certain age, we know what that is, but go to any person in their 20s and they'll look at you like you have a horn growing out of your head. So we're a little bit behind, but we're catching up in the law. Okay, so the next item that I just wanted to highlight as a board bylaw is Board Bylaw 9200. That talks very generally about limits of board member authority and kind of melds into the roles about governance and what the board does from a district policy, visions, goal setting versus the executive part of that. So the board majority is the unit of authority over the district, and individual board members have no individual authority. So that's spelled out specifically in that bylaw. That individual members of the board shall, and this is quoted, shall not exercise any administrative responsibility with respect to the schools or command the services of any school employee. Individual board members shall submit requests for information to the superintendent. Again, in the board bylaw, and so that can be facilitated through superintendent's office. General rule of thumb, and this is just something that I put in, individual board members don't have individual authority to resolve complaints. And that doesn't mean you can't listen to complaints. It doesn't mean you can't field questions about complaints. The reason I bring it up is just from your vanilla attorney perspective, there are certain due processes that come into play when we're talking about certain complaints. So, for example, if we have something like a uniform complaint, that we have a uniform complaint procedure, say someone's experiencing something with textbooks that they have an issue with. We have very specific procedures for a lot of different kinds of complaints. And so in a lot of those procedures, the board is kind of the final say. You're the authority on a final say on the matter. So with those particular, still listen to your constituents. You can field those sorts of inquiries, field those sorts of complaints. Just make sure that they're run through a district channel. There's a lot of complaint processes that exist. So I just put my rule of thumb in there just as a general. And so that concept is really discussed in Board Bylaw 9200 as well. Okay, so board meeting protocols. So this is really your soup to nuts, how board meetings are run. So between the Brown Act and Board Bylaw 9320, as an attorney, that's the board bylaw that I'm in most of the time when I get questions about board level, general counsel type issues. So what is a board meeting? And we're going to be talking more about what that is for Brown Act purposes in a little bit. But a board meeting exists whenever a majority of the board members gather at the same time and place to hear, discuss, or deliberate upon any item within your jurisdiction. So there's a reference there to GC, that's government code. That's where we find the Brown Act. So that's pulled just out of statute and it's referenced specifically in your board bylaw. So generally there are other pieces in 9320, just points of interest. Parliamentary procedures recommended, not enforced, that at least that I saw. Board meetings are held in public. Might seem like common sense, but it is in there. No serial meetings apart from authorized meetings. So all business is conducted as part of a noticed meeting. No serial communications. Closed session meetings are conducted only as authorized by law under the Brown Act. So we'll talk about, there's a very specific list of what we can talk about in closed session. And those are in the board bylaws as well. All meetings are conducted in accordance with the law and the bylaws, including study sessions, like what we're doing. We're having an open meeting study session. That's exactly what we should be doing under the Brown Act. Special meetings and participation via teleconferencing. And that's been one of the big changes that we've seen in the Brown Act is the ability to teleconference. And then board meetings have to provide opportunities for public comment. And you'll have that every single meeting. You've got that covered. Right, Board Bylaw 9240 talks specifically about development opportunities. So it's important, board, that we stay abreast of what's going on, new developments, that you have these sorts of study sessions. So you're right now complying with Board Bylaw 9240. So board members recognize the need for training to help understand responsibilities, stay abreast of new developments, and develop boardmanship skills. So attending conferences and workshops, CSBA, perfect example. Not to sound like a stalker, but I did see I think Mr. Hughes, Ms. Corona at CSBA in San Francisco a couple years ago. Awesome to see you there. I saw you from across the street. And that's fantastic. That's what you should be doing as a board. And it was great to see. Didn't see you in Anaheim, unfortunately, but you know, I didn't take it personally. So it's good to attend conferences and workshops, reporting to the board back on activities that you did attend. That's always great in your board member reports, always wonderful to hear. And there is specifically funds allocated for board development that shall be budgeted annually. So that's straight out of board bylaw. So there's something to be taking into consideration as well. Okay, conflict of interest. So what I'm talking about specifically here are financial conflicts. So that can be another whole presentation unto itself. That 2-hour ethics presentation I was talking about, a lot of it goes to the conflict of interest rules. Yes. 2026, I believe. I'll double check that with you, but I think it is 2026, end of.
So if we went last year, we have to do it again? Every 2 years or something?
I think it's every 2 years.
Oh.
And it went into effect that you have to do it. I think it's all number soup. It was AB 1234. That was easy 2 years ago. And then there was a specific one that made it applicable to school boards and county offices effective January 1st of 25. So we have that window of time to be able to complete that. It is a 2-hour training, and most of it is about conflict of interest and like Form 700 stuff, which, you know, super fun and exciting stuff. But you get through it once, you get through 2 hours. I'm wondering if CSBA would do it as a training in December. I just don't know if they will.
So
I mean-
about 2 years ago or last year, they had it at AVC.
Yeah, that's where I went.
That's where I went.
Oh, okay.
So but I did it with the Lancaster School District. So do I have to do it again for the Antelope Valley High School District?
That's a great question. I think it ties to the individual. I don't think it ties to the entity that you're sitting on. I could double check that for you because I've not had that one come up yet. So that's great.
I know.
You're moving on it.
Next thing you know, I'll be running for assembly.
I'm stepping down now. 26.
All right. All right. I've got that down because that's a great question. Okay, so with conflict of interest rules, so if you've taken it, like you don't have to listen to everything. You've heard all of this before. So board members, this is just pulled out again out of the board bylaw 9270. That's entitled conflict of interest. So board members maintain the highest ethical standards and act in the best interest of the district and the public rather than for personal interest. So what it just pulled right out of the bylaw, avoiding prohibited conflicts. So Government Code 1090 and the Political Reform Act, those are the two main bodies of law that we're talking about. There should be no financial interest in any contract entered by the board. Prohibited contracts are void and voidable. All that means is that there's certain contracts where if there's a direct financial interest, they're void as a matter of law. Even though you've signed it, they just are of no effect. There's different kinds of interests financially that make it voidable, where if someone challenged it, it then becomes void. So that's what I mean, void versus voidable. Disclosing and recusing where remote interests exist. The next slide will talk about what that means. Avoiding the appearance of impropriety. And that is a common law concept, which basically amounts to if it kind of looks like a conflict of interest, it could potentially be a conflict of interest. The case that we cite for that is a city of Hermosa Beach, where a city council member voted against a development project that blocked her view of the ocean. It wasn't a financial conflict. It didn't really fit the box in anything else, but they said, yeah, that's a conflict of interest because it's directly impacting you personally. So that's all we mean by common law is if it doesn't look like everything else, it's kind of a catch-all. So there are some exceptions. So collective bargaining or classes of employees. So if you have someone, a family member that directly is impacted, they're a member of your bargaining unit, or they're a member of a class of employees and you vote on something generally that affects that unit, it's not a conflict of interest. So for example, It's not a disqualifying conflict of interest. Mhm.
But doesn't it also impact their property? Wouldn't they abstain?
That's what I would have done. I would have abstained and not and recused myself from any of the discussion, because you're right, it does directly impact property value. So well, you could argue, well, that's a financial interest. It didn't impact, you know, it wasn't like literally contract giving her money. It wasn't anything where, you know, someone could argue there's a dollar amount flowing to her, like a check or actual money, but you're right. It directly impacted her property value. And that's where they found the hook that, hey, it doesn't really fit into all the financial conflicts, but it's enough. Last piece of Form 700 reporting requirements. So this is just that form that you're filling out that identifies economic interests that could be relevant to district decisions. You report those upon entry, exit, and each year that you're on the board. One time you fill out your Form 700. You're reporting certain pieces on there. The Political Reform Act has forms that are pretty easy to follow about what you need to report and when. So the gift limitations did go up this year. They're tied to the consumer price index. So it was $590. Now it's $630 for the next 2 years. So it did go up a little bit. Yeah, I know, right? It feels like 2 coffees, 2 Starbucks. Yeah. It doesn't go very far. And every reportable one, every individual reportable, you know, you can be well under 630, but you can have individual reportable expenses, anything over $50.
And this is for gifts received, correct? Not for
Correct.
gifts we get. And it's 630 total.
630 total, and it looks back 1 year. And so say, you know, you got a $200 gift. You look backwards 1 year, and if you add everything up and it hits $630, then it's reportable. If it's from one source, I should say $630 from a single source, then that automatically disqualifies that particular source from business with the district. So that all of this stems from a lot of what for 1 year, correct?
Yeah.
Mhm. If it totals to 630, yes. There are a lot of exceptions that are built into it. Prior relationships, mutual gifts. There's about 25 to 30 different exceptions, big laundry list of them. So a lot of the times you'll be able to find an exemption, you know, or you can return gifts too. It says right in there, if you do go ahead and do that return, it doesn't need to be reported. So I talked a bit about what interests mean, and this is for purposes of the government code and the Political Reform Act. So if you have a direct or indirect interest that either of these two pieces fall within to, you cannot form a contract with the entity. So if you have your own business or your spouse owns a business, you can't contract with that business, as well as if you're a major stockholder. What that means is if you own more than 3% of the company in shares. So that is a disqualifying interest. A remote interest, so it's defined in the government code 1091. You can still contract if it falls within one of those. You can still contract as an entity with whatever remote interest, you know, nonprofits, landlord tenants, pre-existing contracts, there's a whole list. You can still contract with that entity. You just have to fully disclose it, document it in the official records, and disqualify yourself. So you remove yourself from the discussion, remove yourself from the vote. You can still do it if it's a remote interest. And then lastly, non-interest, you can contract. It's a list again in 1091.5. It's a little different than a remote interest. It's what the state has said, well, yeah, you have an interest, but for our purposes, we're counting it as a non-interest. So if you're a minor stockholder, less than 3%, if you get expenses reimbursed, like you've incurred expenses and that company reimburses you, it's considered a non-interest. In those instances, you don't have to disclose it at all, and you can participate in the conversation as well as the approval. All right, so moving on to some more about communications. A lot of times we get asked, what can I say as a board member? And that gets really nuanced. Like I said earlier, you're public officials, you have constituents, talk to them. It doesn't mean that you can't talk to them, anything that I'm saying. These are just some things to keep in mind as part of those conversations. So public will reach out to you, you absolutely can reach back. It's not a problem, so long as you're just kind of observing some certain general rules of thumb that we're going to talk about. Complaints or interventions, those should be referred to staff. You can certainly field them, listen to them. They should be referred just so it can be handled. Part of the reason was I was talking about those different processes that exist, just to take it through the appropriate channel. So just as a reminder, board makes policy and the superintendent implements that policy, including responses to complaints or information requests. So some social media considerations.
Question.
Yes.
When it says, what can I say? Do I have to identify myself as a board member? When I meet someone and I work with a lot of clients and they come in and I can, I know they work for the district, but they don't know who I am. Am I required to identify myself?
Not initially as part of those conversations. I mean, it's a good idea too, just in case something does come up. It's not an absolute requirement that you have to disclose that. It may be a good idea just in case it gets off, it may veer off into, hey, I'm having this issue. You can absolutely listen to it, field it, maybe say, I'm on the board. I'm going to refer your question or your concern, your inquiry to staff, and they'll follow up with you. So yeah, there's not a requirement that you have to do it.
And then one more question, which
Yes.
is when you say the public will reach out to us,
Mhm.
same thing. If people, teachers, students, and they reach out to us,
Mhm.
we are allowed to reach back to them. Are we, if they're teachers or students, or we have to immediately refer them and not respond?
You could respond, acknowledge like, hey, I'm receipt, like, thanks for reaching out to me. I'm going to have someone look into this. I'll refer it to the appropriate person. And then you can follow up too. Just basically what you're wanting to do is you're wanting to refer it to the appropriate channel. I'm not saying you have to have your inbox and just ghost people or just not respond to them. You're absolutely able to. I don't want you to think that you can't. A lot of the issues that come up where it looks like, a complaint or an issue should get referred to superintendent, staff, to Mr. Neander staff.
And I could respond as such.
Yes, absolutely. All right, so with social media, and I know I have Twitter up there. I've just never gotten used to X. It's just a matter of habit. So no offense to anyone. But Twitter, Facebook, I know that's a really old school like button. I would probably get clowned by my children if they saw this, but it was just what I chose. So rules with social media, risks with social media. Social media is a powerful tool. I'm not saying don't use it, but there are certain risks associated with it. So social media platforms, they can mask identities and they really reduce accountability. So some people will say more to more people on social media. It just happens. We've all seen it. We've all experienced it. So it can tend to be a little more contentious on social media. Social media exchanges, they lack the control necessary to avoid Brown Act violations. And so we're going to get a bit into that with AB 992 and what that means. We're always cognizant of Brown Act anytime we get three of us together. And we're going to see where sometimes a like can signal that there's actually concurrence amongst three people. And then lastly, social media posts are forever. And we've seen countless examples of it. The one I thought immediately, if you're a football fan, was Josh Allen, who's an incredible quarterback for the Buffalo Bills. He had tweets that came out leading up to the draft that affected his draft stock that he had done back in high school. So I think all our kids now understand this, but it's just something that even I'm cognizant of. Anything I put on social media, it's going to last forever. So there are certain limitations on posting on social media. I just wanted to flag. So privacy considerations and prior consent, sometimes with social media, we may have issues if someone lacked giving consent. Just as an anecdote, I was dealing with something a couple weeks ago where an employee had affirmatively said, I don't want to be on the district's website, and accidentally made it on to the district website. It was down in San Gabriel Valley. So you have those sorts of issues come up. You're not going to know every single thing every single time about what's going on with the person on social media. There are potentially some FERPA and education code issues. FERPA being, students, if you capture likeness or images, you may have FERPA issues, depending on context. Education code 49076 kind of follows what FERPA is about student privacy. 51512, that's about recording in classrooms specifically, that there is a prohibition against that. So that's for like photo and video content. AB 992, we're going to talk about board bylaw 9010, talking about serial meetings and communicating amongst a majority of the board. You can even do it inadvertently through social media. And then, personal versus official social media. There's been, I don't know if you heard of the Garnier case out of Poway Unified that came up, talking about limitations on what you can and can't do on a social media account. And then we're going to talk a little bit about a brand new Supreme Court case that provides some additional rules concerning social media and its use. So AB 992, I've already talked about it. It's been on the books for about 4 years now. And what it did is it amended the government code 54952.2. That's part of the Brown Act. And what I put on this slide, green check mark, these are all things that are okay under AB 992. So certain communications involving members on an internet-based social media platform don't constitute meetings under the Brown Act. So these are the scenarios where they don't. So legislative body member can engage in separate communications on an internet-based social media platform to answer questions, to provide information to the public, and or solicit public input on matters within the body's jurisdiction. So what do these all look like? They're all kind of one-way communications, right? Or one-on-one communications. So in general, with this particular body of law, these are all permissible things that you can do on social media. Where it gets problematic, and this is now written directly into the law. So a majority of the legislative body may not discuss amongst themselves business of a specific nature within the jurisdiction of the board. So what does that mean? That encompasses comments or use of digital icons that express reactions to communications. That's liking stuff. That's a dorky way of saying like or affirm or share. So you cannot do that to express reactions, yay or nay. Any communications posted or shared on social media between members of the legislative body. So you can share posts that could result in an issue with AB 992, because what does it do? It kind of signals how you may be feeling about a certain issue within your jurisdiction. Responses to the same communication on social media, such as the use of emojis, the like button on Facebook or Instagram, and or retweeting on Twitter. So I know that these all sound a little bit silly when we're talking about them, but what do all these things have in common? They're all expressing a viewpoint, right? You may be, liking something that someone will take as, well, they are really all about, this particular textbook or this particular subject matter being taught in our classrooms. So anything that signifies a viewpoint that is shared amongst multiple members of the body, AB 992 says you cannot do so. So what it also says is that trustees cannot directly respond to the social media communication that's made, posted, or shared by any other member of the same body regarding a matter within the body's subject matter jurisdiction. So I only raise this just because we are all active on social media, just personally and professionally. Between LinkedIn, LinkedIn is somewhat problematic in some areas of business, especially. It can be seen as toxic, but there are a lot of things that are shared on LinkedIn, on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram. It's just, there's a lot of opportunities where these can become complications. So just be mindful of it, especially if we end up developing consensus amongst 3 or more. You can absolutely, any two of you can always talk about anything within subject matter jurisdiction. You're not gonna have a Brown Act issue. It's where you involve the third person that gets problematic.
If there's a certain video that the district posts of someone getting an award and I like it and Carla likes it and Charlie likes it, would that be considered?
You're not really talking about anything in that instance as part of like subject matter jurisdiction of the board. You know, that's supporting a student. You know, where it gets a little bit hinky is that if it's like expressing a certain viewpoint, you know, if there's something at the end of the video that you're not aware of, you know, saying like, hey, you know, we really want, you know, bond money for this particular project, and you're not aware that's at the end of the video, then that's where it can become an issue, is expressing a particular viewpoint on something.
They win the championship. We can all combine that. Kids won a championship. That's.
Yeah.
We're okay.
They did it. I know, Cynthia, for me, when I first got on board, I was so just paranoid. Oh my God. So I just don't do it. I just don't do it. So because while I'm here, I mean, yes, certainly the like of the championships and stuff, but I just don't want to get involved. So I don't know if that's gonna help you at all.
I put everything.
And I like whatever he puts on there, so.
Public information.
It's just like it's something we're gonna vote on.
Then that's what.
If it's policy, you don't wanna.
Mhm. Absolutely.
Should be like that.
Okay.
And then they get a job.
Absolutely. So just one last piece on social media accounts, because you may have heard of this case in the news. This just came out from the United States Supreme Court last year. And that case Garnier, that I talked at, Garnier versus Radcliffe, that was a case, like I said, out of Poway Unified. So it was a California school board. And that one, in a nutshell, said that, and we're talking about First Amendment issues when we're getting into these cases, that if you're creating what's called a forum, like say you have an account, you've created a forum. If people are going on there to make public comments about what's going on with your agency, what had happened in Garnier is that they started deleting comments that they didn't like, and then eventually shut down the page. And the court said, that's not okay. You created a public forum. You cannot filter content based on, you can't make a content-based restriction. You can't say, well, because of what you're saying, I'm just going to shut it down. So Linkey versus Freed was very similar, and it created a little bit more certainty, and you'll see what I mean at the end on that. So very similar situation. We had a resident go on the city manager's Facebook page and express their discontent. So the manager initially deleted those comments, but then blocked that certain citizen. And so the resident came back and said, that social media page was a public forum. Everyone knows he's the city manager. Like, you can't filter the content that I put on that page because of what I'm saying, my viewpoint. So what ultimately happened is the court said, well, let's put a few rules around that. So what the holding was ultimately was that a public official's social media activity can constitute state action. So what we referenced, that's just a federal law that people use to file federal lawsuits, not state lawsuits. So they looked at it as like a two-pronged test, and they said, well, you know, a social media account for First Amendment purposes is state action. You know, you're speaking on behalf of the public entity. If you possess actual authority to speak on their behalf and you purport to exercise that authority when you're speaking. So what exactly that means is if it looks official and it's something that people go to expect and you have that authority to speak on their behalf, on the public entity's behalf, then you have created a public forum. The takeaways from it is just that what I said just now was the first bullet point. But second, you know, with the enforcement of this decision, we could see more courts ruling in favor of public officials on First Amendment lawsuits specific to speech and forum issues. But we do caution public officials should exercise caution before deleting or hiding comments on social media accounts, because it still absolutely can subject you to certain issues. There may be state law. It's going to be very fact-specific inquiries about whether or not a social media account is considered a public entity's account for purposes of First Amendment. We also have all the issues with AB 992 separately. So just another point. Yes, Mr. Hughes.
Just put out information, but we think no politics, it's just to put out information.
Mhm.
That's a separate. Or like, you can say it, but you.
Correct.
That's a public debate, so we're not allowed.
Correct, exactly. So where the issue arises is if you create that forum, a space for people to express themselves. That's where, yes, exactly. So if someone goes on there, now there's limitations to it. If someone, says, extreme vulgarities that violate, Facebook's or Instagram's content standards, then you can address that. But if people are complaining or putting their viewpoint on a certain piece out, yeah, that's where you get in trouble. But if you don't turn it on at all, you're not censoring anyone. Yeah.
So if you have
Whoops.
so I have a personal account
Mhm.
and somebody, well, I guess they would have to be my friend.
Yours is private. I think
Yeah,
that's
if it's
different.
private, I mean, you're all individuals, you're all, yeah, you're all people. Yeah, if it's a parent, that's your personal account. And, I would recommend that too, just in general, that, if you want to put privacy on your personal pages, absolutely, like you're empowered to do that. And if it's clear that it's your personal account, that's fine. It's just where it looks like you're starting to speak on behalf of the district is where it gets a little funky. That's not a legal term. I don't know why I said funky. All right, so what I'm just going to do with the rest of our time is just go over very briefly, some Brown Act. And this, like I said, this is a presentation unto itself, but I just wanted to give you the big highlights. So for what we're talking about with the Brown Act, what is a meeting? So this is the textbook definition. It's any gathering of a quorum of a legislative body to discuss or transact district business. That's the baseline, definition of Brown Act meeting. Avoiding serial meetings. Again, if you have a series of communications that ultimately develops consensus or develops a viewpoint or constitutes a discussion amongst 3 or more people through separate conversations, that's a serial meeting. Can't be doing that either. It includes standing subcommittees, but not ad hoc committees. So Brown Act will apply based on that particular designation. So what are some exceptions? Conferences and meetings that are open to the public. The example I give is CSBA. I mean, that's a conference, you're all in attendance, you're all listening to and taking in information about stuff that's important to you as school board members. That's a noted exception in the Brown Act. You can't attend those, absolutely. Purely social or ceremonial events. You can all go to a football game. You can all attend an awards ceremony. That's not a problem because you're just purely there to support the district. It's a social or ceremonial event. You can absolutely have a majority there. And then in general, any gathering where there's no discussion of district business. You could all have dinner together and not talk about the district at all. You're not committing a Brown Act violation. It's where you're starting to talk about pieces that come within your jurisdiction where it gets problematic. So don't think I'm telling you you can't ever be seen outside of a board meeting, 3 or more of you. It's generally a good idea just to avoid that situation. However, there are plenty of situations where you can be because you're not discussing or deliberating on district business. Let's see, location, just anything open to the public constitutes a meeting. ADA accessible. I only bring that up because that came about a lot during the pandemic where people were making those sorts of claims. It's written directly into the Brown Act about ADA accessibility. And then within the boundaries of the district. There are certain exceptions, very limited exceptions, but for the most part should be within the boundaries of the district. But for example, there's an exception where you can conduct an interview of a potential official or a potential employee. You can do that, but it's very limited. Okay, so just some new-ish pieces to consider, teleconferencing and video conferencing. We have always had on the books that one or two members could participate remotely. That was always something you could telephone into, so long as you're meeting certain requirements in the Brown Act, still the law. You could still do it that way. Posting agendas wherever that person is, and they can phone in. You have to have the notice location, posted agenda, and holding remote location open and accessible to the public. So someone can participate if it's one or two of you, so long as you're meeting those requirements. During the pandemic, we had the executive order first about holding meetings that later evolved into AB 361. And what that says is all members can participate remotely during a state of emergency if you have a resolution declaring public safety need. So the pandemic, that was an easy one for us to comply with. The public has to be allowed to observe and participate telephonically or otherwise electronically. We're accomplishing that by Zoom. So AB 361 is still on the books. Hopefully we never have anything like COVID-19 again, but if we do, where we have a public safety need, we can still do it remotely. And then lastly, AB 2449. It's new within the last 2 years. It was just a different way for certain members of the board to participate remotely. Those traditional rules don't exactly apply if you're using 2449. You can have someone, less than a majority participating remotely for just cause or for an emergency situation. So my most recent was that I had a board member who needed to accompany a spouse. They had a situation where the spouse was in the hospital, and we were able to use 2449. We recognized that was an emergency. There's just cause for that person to be participating remotely. So we were able to use that exception. The key in all of it's just accessibility. That's really what we care about, is the public access to what business is being conducted. All right, so I've already kind of tap danced around what a serial meeting is. I'm just going to give you the textbook definition now. So this is straight out of the Brown Act. So majority of the members of the body shall not, outside a meeting authorized by this chapter, use a series of communications of any kind through intermediaries to discuss, deliberate, or take action on any item that's within subject matter jurisdiction of the legislative body. So what does that mean is that you're either communicating directly, by down the chain, developing consensus, or you're using one intermediary. We had one time, a long time ago, a client say, remember when things were really bad in like 09, 10, 11, we were doing a lot of layoffs. We had the assistant soup come into the room and say, great news, we don't have to do a layoff. And we're like, why? We were teed up for like 150 person layoff. And they said, well, the board's not going to support it. They said they're not going to go through with it. And we said, well, how do you know that? And it was because they were using an intermediary to gain consensus amongst a majority of the board. That's a serial meeting if you're using an intermediary to communicate about something within your jurisdiction. So what's not a serial meeting? So an employee or official of a local agency can engage in separate conversations or communications outside of a meeting to answer questions or provide information regarding a matter within the jurisdiction of the agency. That person does not communicate comments or position of any other member to other members. So that's where we have individualized conversations, as long as you're not developing consensus around, we call it the hub and spoke. That's why I keep doing this. You can certainly do that so long as you're adhering to this definition. Correct. So serial meetings, what's just the key to safety? So just some safety tips. And other points just to bring up. So one-way communications from non-board members to the board are always safe. So what do I mean by that? Communication from superintendent to board members. That's a one-way communication. From legal counsel, from unions, from the community, anyone who's not a board member, if it's going one way, that's always going to be safe. Where I say it's not 100% safe to respond is that we don't know that a response could accidentally cause a violation. And the classic example is the reply all situation. If I have a one-way communication that there's a reply all, to everyone, say one-way communication to all 5 board members, and someone replies all and says like, well, I think that's a terrible idea. That's a serial meeting. So we want to avoid those situations. If you get that sort of communication, You really want to limit it right back to the person who communicated it to you. Up to 2 members can communicate about district business. You can absolutely have any 2 of you communicating about it, so long as each one knows and agrees not to talk to any of the others. So if another member attempts to communicate in that situation, if you do, you can respond. You can just politely inform them like, hey, I can't discuss that. I have a Brown Act concern. Doesn't mean that you just cannot talk to them. Similarly, if you're just like scheduling something, saying, hey, are you available for a special meeting? That's not talking about district business. You're just scheduling. So it's when you're having substantive deliberative conversations. And then unintentional violations can result from responding to any outside communication just because you don't know who else has already responded. So talking about an outsider, if you're responding amongst yourself to other people on the board, you don't know how many or who they've talked to. So it just can inadvertently cause a serial meeting issue. Okay, so just some, I'm going to go through these quickly. Some agendas. Agendas for Brown Act, they have to be posted in advance of meetings. So you got 72 hours for regular, 24 for special. We have 1 hour for emergencies, work stoppages, and crippling disasters. So I use this most recently with some of the wildfires. So we were able to do that on a very quick basis. Agenda items in general have to reasonably apprise the public of what business is being conducted. The rule of thumb is usually no more than 20 words. That's what the Brown Act says. You just have to basically inform the public. This generally is what we're going to be talking about. Agenda materials that are provided to the board become public records unless they're otherwise protected. If it's attorney-client privilege communication in closed session, that's not a public record. Anything that's given to a majority or all of you as part of a meeting becomes public record. Agenda materials provided to board members within 72 hours of a meeting are to be made available to the public without delay. It's just all Brown Act straight definitions. Board actions. So where I say that really we're talking about 3 people, we're going to have a lot of decisions that are 5-0. But by law, we only need 3. So the board acts by a majority vote, and that's just straight out of the education code. So anything that you take, as long as there's 3 of you, that's the official action. So just through in what an action means, a collective decision, a commitment or a promise to one particular course of action, anything on a motion, proposal, resolution, order, or ordinance, just anything that the 3 of you are voting on is action. And then actions taken by the board are recorded in the board minutes, including individual votes. So this is, again, going kind of back to a lot of what's in your board bylaws, just pulled straight out of there. Public comment, you also have on your board bylaw 9323. Members of the public are provided opportunity to address the board on any agenda item before during the board's consideration of the item. You, I think, generally have all of your public comment first on closed session items, and then for regular meetings, then it's any item on the agenda or within your jurisdiction. Specials, it's only restricted to what's on the agenda. Board members can respond to public comment, ask clarifying questions, or ask staff to follow up and report back. So you're allowed to have, some folks say, well, I just take everything in. I'm not allowed to say anything at all. That's not true. You have some leeway to respond back, refer, ask clarifying questions, etc. Right, in a back and forth, because that can get in the situation where, you may be discussing something that wasn't on the agenda, and that's where it gets problematic. But yeah, the big back and forth conversations, correct. Okay. So just a little bit more on public comment. These are things, again, specific to our district. You can absolutely make public comment subject to reasonable regulation. I put 20 minutes because it talks about 20 minutes total per item directly in your board bylaws. So that's something that is on the books. If a translator is required, you have to double speaking time. That's just something out of the Brown Act. Baca versus Moreno Valley, something about at this point, a 30-plus-year-old case. What that basically said, there's a rule on the books in that particular city that you cannot disparage staff members or members of the board as part of public comment. The court said you can't do that. That's a inhibition, that's a prohibition on free speech. So you just cannot prohibit criticism. You can direct persons to complaint procedures as part of a response. You can gently remind people of, certain privacy issues if someone starts getting into a privacy issue. We've had issues where someone started talking about specific students, where we've said, let's not talk about specific students. That can create an issue. You can warn about those sorts of things in response to a comment. You can also direct to staff for assistance. Individual board members should not respond if the matter is not on the agenda other than to direct to staff or request a future agenda item. And then even during board member comments, specific matters of business should be avoided if not on the agenda. And that's talking about something specific in terms of a viewpoint on something before the board's jurisdiction. A board member report, let it fly. You can absolutely talk about anything and everything in your board member comments. Great, so just a few pieces on closed session. We're coming around the bend, we're almost there. Only matters on the agenda can be considered during closed session. And so this is just a list, it's out of your board bylaws, but also the Brown Act about specific subject matter that you can talk about in closed session. I bring this up just because these are the most frequent ones. And then just a point of clarification is that board members cannot disclose confidential information that's received in closed session to any person not authorized by the board to receive it. It's just a technicality in the government code that gets brought up from time to time if there's issues about confidential information that's being disclosed out of closed session. So it is specific to the Brown Act. Just a point on student discipline issues, because this one sometimes comes as a surprise and we only bring it up because it's an education code thing. So I did double check your board policy and admin reg 5144.1 specific. They're very long. It's a really long procedure that you have. Everyone has a really long procedure. So what the ed code in those policies specifies that student discipline is to be held in closed session. So whether that's an expulsion hearing or hearing by an administrative hearing panel, that by default is in closed session. Student can absolutely elect to have it in open session if they want. That's their right. In either case, the board vote technically the board vote on expulsions occurs in open session. So everything happens behind closed doors. It's the vote itself. And I bring it up because that's just the ed code. That's what that says. The vote itself happens in open. Student discipline matters, they're highly confidential. People confidentiality laws have to be respected. The main reason we do in closed session is FERPA. Just the Federal Educational Rights Privacy Act. Students have that right with expulsion proceedings and any discipline. And then just again, board members shall not disclose confidential information received to any person not authorized by the board. All right. And then just last, to end it all out, some specific rules that we have with respect to the Brown Act that I just like to bring up. Reporting and recording the individual vote of each member. That's a technical requirement under the Brown Act, and I know that the system that you use does that automatically when items come up. Voting on employment contracts, that happens in open session in a regular meeting. When I talk about employment contracts, I'm talking about executive cabinet. So that's it's a technicality. You can, if you're approving them, it's in open session at a regular meeting. Can't have a special meeting to do it. Along those lines, you have to do an oral report of a summary of the recommendation for comp and benefits for an executive contract in open session prior to the vote. So what is that? It's basically a little script. You take the matter up, you read what the proposed compensation is prior to taking it up for discussion and vote. It's a technicality in the Brown Act that we're not always aware of. No discussion of salaries and benefits in closed session, except if you're having conference with labor negotiators. You can absolutely have those. Just an interesting point is that there are certain exceptions in the Educational Employment Relations Act which govern your back and forth negotiations with exclusive representatives, your labor groups, is that there's an exception in there to the Brown Act to holding those discussions. You can have it outside of a Brown Act noticed meeting. I think it's 3549.1. It's an interesting exception that exists out there that sometimes get used from time to time. No discussion of compensation in a special meeting. That just kind of goes to the general rule about executive compensation. And then last is the agendas have to be posted on your website with a single click access. That's now a technicality under the Brown Act. I checked, you all have it. You can go right on your website, click it, it takes you right to board docs, right to today's agenda. So you're good on that. All right, well, that was I know a lot to throw at you. I just wanted to be respectful, of our time, and I don't want to hold you too late. I'm happy to stay as long as you want to go over any questions or questions that you have, but that's everything that I had for you substantively. But yeah, if you have anything, just let me know. We can talk. I'll stay as long as you want.
Thank you.
Does anyone have any questions? All right,
All right.
I think we're just gonna read and continue to learn, and we have our governance handbook, so if everybody can make sure to review that.
Awesome, President, I'd like to make a motion.
Let's move to adjournment. Scene I. It's recommended that the board adjourn the meeting. Scene die. May I have a motion?
I will motion.
Can I get a second?
I will second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?